Hello.
Hey, Tony, good to see you.
Let me just tell this person I'll call him back.
Hey, great.
I'm on a Zoom call. Can I call you back? Okay, bye.
That's a
Somebody
wonderful
I just
background you have.
What?
That's a wonderful background you have.
That's the Golden Gate Bridge.
Huh.
But I'm in Pennsylvania, but that's my favorite. So I use it all the time.
Yeah, we went there some years ago. I went on a trip to San Francisco, saw the Mission Hill and
Yeah.
Alcatraz, things like that.
Yep.
Very beautiful city.
Yeah, it really is.
So, what's your favorite part of this good country?
Oh, let's see. I think I'm prejudiced, but I think the capital of this country is spectacular with
Yeah,
all the the White House, the Capitol, the monuments, the way it's all placed and so forth.
yeah.
It's overwhelmingly powerful. And so that's, the one I think that's spectacular. What is my favorite city or area? San Francisco. But I think it's the uh, physical beauty of it is unmatchable. But I think
Yeah.
I love the symbolism of the U.S. Capitol.
DC is wonderful, and I'm on the FDR Memorial Legacy Committee,
Oh,
and
are you good?
I'm doing a lot of work for them, trying to use FDR's legacy to promote disability acceptance and understanding. So we have a very special. First of all, everyone, hi, this is Tony Coelho. He's a dear friend of mine, and you have a number of claims to fame. We'll try to get to some of them. So you are currently working on the campaign, the 2020 campaign.
Yes, I'm involved with the Biden campaign. We don't talk about what we do. I'm just involved.
Right, right. Well, I should assure you that you have my support in that. It's
Thank you. Thank you.
there are some very unfortunate things happening right now, and we've got to make sure that they get in the past, um, focus on the future.
And a lot of those things really hurt our community.
Yeah,
That's unfortunate.
yeah. So I've looked a bit into your background. It says you wanted to become a Catholic priest back in the day.
That's true.
Yeah. So,
Let me give you a little bit of the history of that.
yeah, sure.
Um, when I was 16, I was in a pickup truck on our family's dairy farm, going down a canal bank, and the driver was speeding, and it was a gravel bank, and we flipped over into the canal. As we flipped, I hit my head on the
Mhm.
windshield, and the window was open on the side, so we easily swam out. Um, the My head hurt, but nothing else, and the pickup was totaled, which was not good for my family. But a year later, I was in the barn milking, and I uh, reached down to pick up some feed to feed the cow I was milking. And the next thing I knew, I was in bed in the house, um, and there was a doctor there. The doctor basically told my family that he thought that I'd had an epileptic seizure.
Mhm.
My family didn't tell me that, nor did the doctor. And in those days, you talked around the person with a disability as opposed to the person with a disability. And so my family, being Portuguese and Catholic, felt that if you had epilepsy, you were possessed by the devil. And that's been taught in a lot of cultures, so it's not
Yeah.
just Portuguese. But the church was an advocate of it. And so then we went to three other doctors, and my family said They thought it was a lack of calcium. They thought it was a lack of this or whatever. And what they really were telling them that it was epilepsy, but they kept moving to other doctors. After the third doctor, they weren't getting what they wanted. So they then had me go to a witch doctor.
Oh dear.
And so I went through the experience of the darkened room, candles burning on your chest, and oil poured on your forehead and on your chest, and speaking the languages and so forth. And I went to 3 because none of them could solve these passing out spells that I was having.
Mm.
And after the third one, I said that I would not go to any others. The third one said that I had to take a fresh egg, put it under my armpit, and hold it there for X number of hours. And if it turned black, that meant that the evil spirits had came out. Well, it didn't work. So I didn't go anymore, but that caused a problem with me and my family because I rejected going to these witch doctors. So the whole thing was that they felt that if I had a seizure in public, that it meant that God was punishing our family for something that somebody in the family had done. So looking back on it, I understand a lot more now about what they were going through, but I didn't know any of that at the time. So they sort of limited my public activities. And it hurt a lot that they were doing that. So then I went away to college. Decided that it was important that I get away from milking the cows and getting away from the whole culture there.
If I just let me interject, where did you grow up?
It was in the center part of California, Central Valley, in Merced County, and a small town called Dos Palos in Merced County. And so then I went away to college in Los Angeles, Loyola Marymount University, at the time Loyola University. And I really loved it. It was, I didn't know anybody when I got there. I ended up after 4 years being student body president and very engaged and involved. And I loved everything about it. But and while I was there, John F. Kennedy got assassinated. And that hit me really hard. He was my hero at the time. I remember going to the chapel and ringing the bell in the chapel, getting everybody to the church to pray that while he got hit, that he would live through it. And it became where the whole weekend, I didn't leave my room. I was watching TV the whole time. And sort of as a result of that, I started thinking about what do I want to do with my life? And I was wanting to be a trial lawyer at the time. And I decided that I wanted to go do something in public service. And I thought the best thing to do, I was being taught by the Jesuits at Loyola, and I fell in love with the Jesuits. And so I decided that, I just had a calling and that I wanted to become a priest. So when I graduated, it was a big announcement by the Jesuits that student body president was going into the Jesuits and all that stuff. And I went to a doctor for a physical. The doctor did the physical and then said to me, "You ever heard the word epilepsy?" And I said, "No." He told me what it was. He says, "That's what you have. And I can prescribe medication to help you in the severity of them. And not a cure, but I can help you." So that was great. And it was good news for me. Now I knew what it was, right? And so he said, there's bad news and good news. The good news is you're 4F, and this was 1964. So you will not be able to serve in the military. And that's in the middle of Vietnam.
Yeah.
He said, the bad news is that the Catholic Church in 400 AD said that if you have epilepsy or possessed by the devil, you can't be a priest. And so he says, you will not be able to get into the seminary. So that was not so much of a blow to me at the time because I was really thrilled that I knew what my problem was. And I had student body president, I had all kinds of job offers and so forth. So I'll just do something else, so that's okay. And I was a very positive person at that time. And so I started going, well, my driver's license was taken away, the insurance was taken away, and so forth. But that didn't bother me at all. I still drove, and it was in LA, nobody's going to know. But I started going to these job interviews. And I'd fill out the application, and they said, we'll call you. I never got an interview because on every job application was the word epilepsy, and I checked it. So after a while, I started to realize there was something going on here, and I started feeling sorry for myself. I felt that everything had turned against me that I cherished, my God, my church, my family. And all of a sudden, now this. And so I started drinking heavily, was drunk by 2 or 3 in the afternoon. I was doing it in Griffith Park, which is the park in Los Angeles.
Mhm.
And the one day that I was going to do the dirty deed, I was suicidal, I heard a voice. And the voice said, you're going to be just like those kids at the bottom of that hill on a merry-go-round. It's going to just be like those little kids. You're never going to let anything or anybody stop you from doing what you want to do. And as a result of that, I've never gotten drunk since then. I drank, but I never gotten drunk. I've never been depressed since then. And I got my spirit back. And I ended up going to live with Bob Hope and his family for a year. And Mr. Hope was fabulous to me, treated me like a son. And he's the one who suggested, he said, look, your problem is you think you have a ministry and it can only be practiced in church. A true ministry is practiced in sports, entertainment, business, government. And where you belong is in politics. I had really never considered that. So I wrote a letter to my congressman, and I got a job, and I worked for him for 14 years and then got elected to Congress.
That's a very powerful story. It really is. I'm not sure you know this, but I had a stroke like 8 years ago, and it turns out I have a condition called HHT, which gave me lesions on the brain, and I actually had to have brain surgery done. And they did this, fortunately, they did it endoscopically. They stuck a catheter in,
Yeah.
and I could feel it moving around in the folds of my brain. And I asked the surgeon, is that what I'm feeling? And he said, yes, now shut up. So yeah, and finding a true calling is really important. And when you and I first met in 2011, first day of the APD internship class, you came in with Joyce Bender, who's also another dear mentor of mine. I thought I might want to become an archivist for a living. My mom and I were watching this movie American Splendor about Harvey Pekar, the cartoonist, and I'm like, I wouldn't mind if I were doing that, a file clerk for the rest of my life. That's literally what I thought I had in store for me. The APD internship taught me of the wonderful world of disability advocacy, and I've been doing that ever since. And then about 3-4 years ago, I got into pop culture criticism, and I'm combining that with the disability advocacy. So you've been very involved in disability advocacy, and you are, what people say about you behind your back is that you literally wrote the Americans with Disabilities Act.
Well, the facts are these. The facts are is that when I got elected, I started offering amendments to legislation, and I realized all of a sudden that it didn't work because we didn't have our basic civil rights. We couldn't sue, we couldn't do anything, and people by law had the right to discriminate against us.
Yeah.
If you were in a wheelchair and you went to a movie theater, they had the legal right to kick you out because you could be a hazard. If you were sight impaired, you went to a restaurant and asked the waiter to tell you what's on the menu. The waiter had a right to kick you out because you were a nuisance. If you went to get a job, the employer or whoever had a right to ask you if you had a disability and to tell you, because of your disability, I'm not going to hire you. That was all legal. And so I realized that offering amendments to try to eliminate that didn't work. And so then I started talking to different people about putting something together. And I started working with folks in the Reagan administration at that time. I was in the Congress, and the National Council on Disabilities. They were working on legislation. And basically, I ended up putting in legislation in 1988. And when I put it in, I had 68 co-sponsors. And what we decided is that the only way it could get through is if I did it in the House, that we had to have somebody in the Senate as a Republican, so that it was bipartisan, bicameral, meaning House and Senate. And so Lowell Weicker of Connecticut became the senator. He had a son who had a disability. And so Lowell was willing to be aggressive, and he was. At the end of that year, of 88, he got defeated. So in the new Congress, starting in 89, Bob Dole, Ted Kennedy, Orrin Hatch, and Tom Harkin became the leads for the Senate ADA. And on the House side, I'm there, I'm the majority whip. So I was the lead. I put the legislation back in, because you have to do it new in every Congress, put it back in. And ultimately that legislation got 252 co-sponsors. So overwhelming support. All you need is 218. But the leadership at the time, Tom Foley was the speaker. I'm the whip. So I'm number 3, he's number 1. And he calls me in and he says, Tony, I love the legislation that you're pushing, but it's really too expansive. And I think the public's going to revolt against it. And I wish you'd pull it and let's work on it and so forth. And I said, no, that it was too important to me and too important to our community. And I was going to keep on pushing it. At the same time that this was all going on, the grassroots community, which I didn't know that much about, the grassroots community was really working on this, building it. And there was all kinds of people that were very active in trying to get it done. So as I put in the legislation, there is this mob of people all over the country that were pushing for something like the ADA. So yeah, I put it in. I was aggressively active, and because I was whip, I was able to have some influence on it and be able to turn down the speaker. On the Senate side, when you have Ted Kennedy and Bob Dole and Orrin Hatch and Tom Harkin all engaged, and they could get it through pretty easily on the Senate. On the House side, what happened is that the speaker then assigned the legislation to 4 or 5 committees and several subcommittees. And it was a whole effort to try to slow it down and see if it could be stopped in effect. And when I left the Congress, I asked Steny Hoyer of Maryland to take the lead, and Steny did. And Newt Gingrich was a friend of mine, the speaker, the majority leader on their side, and minority whip on their side. And I asked Newt if he would be helpful in regards to it. And he appointed Steve Bartlett from Dallas, Texas, a member, to be the Republican lead. So you had Steny Hoyer, Democratic lead, Steve Bartlett, the Republican lead, and they worked together to keep it bipartisan. And they went through the committees. We picked the most supportive subcommittee. Major Owens of New York was the chairman of that subcommittee, very supportive. And we got it through that subcommittee, and then we were able to move to other subcommittees, move it through the full committee, then go to the next committee, a subcommittee. And what we try to do is create a movement, a ball rolling, so that when we got to the one that we knew was problems, which was the Public Works Committee, that we would have this tremendous momentum from the previous committees and that we could push it through. And there are some stories about how we got it through the Public Works Committee, but that was our whole method of trying to get it done. We knew the Senate would pass it, but it was a question of could we get it through the House?
Right. And then you mentioned the activists who were involved. My previous interviewee was actually Judy Heumann.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, she's a dear friend, and and I know Yosha Godard. Unfortunately, I never got to meet Justin. But how how did you involve them at all in the process? I mean, were you? I
Not
know
at,
that.
not in
Yeah.
the beginning. Not in the beginning. I really didn't know. I mean, I have epilepsy. And I was very involved with the epilepsy community, and so I knew all of them and the problems we were having. But I didn't. And then once I introduced the bill, I got involved with Justin in particular, and then Judy I got to know. But Justin I got very involved with in the process, and he, as you know, was traveling around the country developing grassroots support, and he did, a wonderful, beautiful job. He started that. He was very close to Reagan and very close to Papa Bush. So we had that Republican element to it, which was very important for us. But having Dole and Orrin Hatch supportive, and then having Newt willing to keep our back, we were able to keep the bipartisanship there, which was great. And the grassroots, if they hadn't been involved, I don't think we could have gotten it, because they kept it from being overly controversial towards the business community. The business community, particularly the motor bus owners, Greyhound in particular, they really fought it hard. We got the chamber on our side. The National Chamber was on our side. We had real trouble with the realtors. The realtors were a problem,
Yeah.
and the home builders were a problem. But having the chamber
Is
involved
this the
with us,
Chamber of Commerce?
Chamber of Commerce,
Yeah.
having them supportive was helpful. So it was working all those angles. The grassroots community helping us with that was tremendous.
I'm glad. Now, you mentioned bipartisanship. I think even when we met in 2011, disability was in big part a bipartisan cause. Today, I'm not sure about that. Any thoughts
It
on
isn't.
that?
It isn't.
It isn't. Yeah.
And how it started was that after we got the ADA and several other things done, the UN passed a treaty that said that if you had anywhere in the world, if you had a disability, you were protected in effect. So what happened is that George Bush, no, that started with Clinton, and then George Bush signed the document, but then the only way it could be passed, it had to go through the Senate as a treaty, and you had to have 2/3 vote. And so that meant 67 members of the Senate. So all the Democrats were for it. And Bob Dole was really working it hard. I was very involved in that effort. And we basically thought we had the votes, or at least the commitments, I'll put it that way. And in the lame duck session of that year, a lame duck is a Congress in session after a general election. And so they then meet from November to January. And so it was a lame duck session. In that election year, Ted Cruz got elected to the Senate. He was not yet a senator, but he was elected. And in that lame duck session, those individuals that were elected participated in the luncheons that the senators had. They would meet every Wednesday for lunch, and the Republicans in one room and the Democrats in another room. And at that Republican luncheon, Ted Cruz was there. And he got up, and that day, the treaty was being discussed on the Senate floor and to be adopted. And he got up and told the Republican senators that this was an awful bill and why, and that the UN could take away young disabled children from families where they felt that they were not treating the family fair. That was a whole movement that had been started by an element of people on the Republican side. A former senator from Pennsylvania was one of the
Santorum, right?
Santorum was
Yeah.
one of the big advocates of that, and so Cruz talked about that. Came right after that luncheon, they came to the floor to vote on the treaty. Um, Bob Dole was on the floor as a former senator, and his wife, Liddy Dole, was on the floor as a former senator from North Carolina, Bob being from Kansas. And they were both on the floor, and it was a big moment because we were all in the galleries and really a bunch of us. And we knew that this was going to happen. And as they came on the floor, they would all say hello to Bob, and then we lost by 2 votes.
Mm.
And it was a direct result of actually both members, Republican members from the state of Kansas, voted against Bob and voted against us. And we lost it. And so right now, today, and throughout the whole world, everybody has signed the treaty except the United States and 1 African country. A sad commentary, but that in effect started the split between the Democrats and the Republicans on disability issues. And then you got into Obamacare with the pre-existing conditions, and up to 26 kids were taken care of. And so there was a whole effort to try to beat Obamacare, including pre-existing conditions, which is us.
Yeah.
And so then the House started in the negative as well. And then in the last Congress, just this last Congress, the Republicans passed legislation that would have basically destroyed the ADA. And it passed by just a few votes, but it passed. I don't know, it was something like 220 or whatever it was.
I was involved in defeating that. I think I actually gave a speech on Capitol Hill that day.
Good.
We met up there, you know.
I was there.
Yeah,
So,
yeah. You were standing next to me, to tell the truth. I had video of that, not anymore, but I had, you know, that was kind of a proud day, you know.
yeah.
We got that.
And so, but the good thing is that the Senate was controlled by the Democrats, and it never came up. And then in this Congress, now the Democrats control the House, and it hasn't even been brought up. And so hopefully we can kill it. But that was, so you take the treaty and then this vote to gut the ADA, that has really caused a negative on the Republican side. And I hope we can bring them back in. I mean, this has to be a bipartisan issue. It should not be. You know, disability doesn't pay attention to if a Democrat or Republican or conservative or liberal. It just is all of us. And those people who don't have a disability today, I always say the ADA is your insurance policy, because if you have an accident or whatever happens and you become disabled, ADA is your insurance policy to make sure. And so we've got to bring us back in a bipartisan way.
I should say, for the information of those watching and listening, that the UN thing you were talking about, the Convention on the Rights of People with Disabilities, would not require anything of the United States.
That's exactly right.
It wouldn't take kids away. It wouldn't do jack. It would actually require of other less established countries that they would live up to our standard. It's based on the ADA.
We have the strongest disability policy in the world. So it was others having to do not necessarily what we had, but had to do something in regards to disability. That's what it's all about. It didn't impact us at all, and you're exactly right.
There's this unfortunate, I think it's misnamed. Its proponents call it American exceptionalism. I call it basically borderline fascism. You know, that's it's this idea that we should be excluded from the world. And what we have uncomfortably right now is a president who's pulled us out of the World Health Organization, out of UNESCO, out of all of those things. And I think that getting back in there will be a key priority come January. I There are people I know who think there's some way that the guy who's currently in office can wrestle the election. I think it's pretty far gone. I don't think he has much of a chance. You
Well,
know.
politics is strange, as you well know. And so we have over 3 months to go. Um, Anything can happen, but I don't think with the pandemic that things are going to change too much. And uh, the president has totally, totally mishandled this whole thing. And I don't think the public's going to forgive him for what he's done and the number of people that have died as a result of inaction. And more people are realizing that the inaction is what's caused us our problem, and that not insisting that everybody has to wear a mask, not insisting that there should be separation and so forth. But all those simple little things could have saved thousands and thousands of lives.
I think
And
yesterday or the day before, the Surgeon General said that if everybody were to suddenly start wearing a mask, this thing would go to very well contained within 4 to 8 weeks. You know,
yeah,
and yeah. So anyway, so that's a lot about disability. Cause I hope you don't mind me bringing up, but I am quite gay, and
good for you.
I'm friends with Bobby on Facebook. You have a wonderful life going to celebrations and things, dude. You're good friends with Linda Carter. I wish I knew Linda Carter. You know, she's like, it seems like before the epidemic, at least you saw her like what, once or twice a month. You know, she was like family.
Yeah, we're very close. I've known Linda and her husband for 40 years, and
Wow.
I was been very, very close to them. Have She's a wonderful person. When I established the Coelho Disability Center at Loyola in Los Angeles, Linda and Robert, her husband, Linda and Robert were the hosts and opened it up. They're very wonderful people, and they understand disability, and I love them very much.
Yeah. Of course, as you can tell, I'm very involved in the comic book scene and things like that. I speak at conventions and stuff like that. So she's kind of a hero. Um, let's see. Try not to get too personal, but when about
But
did
before you start,
yeah,
there's nothing personal with me because I'm public and everybody knows
okay,
everything about me. I never worry about any question. I answer them
good to
all.
know. Good to know. So when did you come out? When did you start living, the life,
The
live
gay life.
loving, the loving life? Yeah.
Well, I grew up in a small town. Had never really heard the word gay. Never been involved with gays. That was, you know, 70 years ago. Um, and I didn't date much, got married, two beautiful, wonderful girls, and so forth. And while I was in the Congress as a staffer and as a member, I was traveling all the time. Every weekend I was somewhere. I was very engaged, moving rapidly up the leadership ladder in the Congress. And I didn't pay attention to much. I didn't have time to do anything but work. And I worked, and being in Washington, D.C. and representing a congressional district in California, I went back to California once a month and spent time there. And then twice a month, I was um, involved with uh, disabilities and speaking and doing things and raising money and finding candidates, because I was chairman of the Democratic Congressional Campaign Committee.
Mhm.
And then when I was whip, I was doing more of that, going around the country helping candidates and raising money. So I never thought about my personal life. I never thought about anything. It just, everything kept moving. When I left the Congress, I went to Wall Street and began a great career there. But the interesting thing is that I still lived in Washington, D.C., and on Monday morning, I'd go to New York. And on Thursday night, I'd come back to DC and spend the weekend in DC and then back up to New York Monday morning. And I was the CEO of an investment management company, part of a investment bank, an overall bank. And I ran the investments, financial wealth management, so forth. And interestingly, growing up in Congress, I got up early and stayed up late, and I worked all the time. I love to work. I still do. But when I got there, I'd go to the office at 9 o'clock, and there was not many people there. And then people would come in, and at 4:30, 5 o'clock, everybody left. That's unusual for me. I mean, my day was still going normally. So, I'd be there and I'd leave, and the bank had gotten me an apartment only 2 blocks from the office. So I'd walk to the apartment, and I didn't know people in town, didn't know anybody, and I'd pick up some food at one of the food stores on the way home to the condo, and I'd go in, and I started reading a lot. And all of a sudden, I started asking questions about myself. And I started thinking about stuff that I questioned and wanted to know more about. And I started reading and reading and reading, and realized that maybe that I had a different lifestyle, maybe that I was gay. And I really went into it to determine. And one day I realized that, yeah, I was, and that's where I was. And my upbringing is that you got to be honest with yourself, and you got to be honest with others. And I had a very good marriage, a wonderful wife, and 2 wonderful daughters, and so forth. And when I realized where I was headed, I realized that I had to tell my wife, and so I did. And she was very distraught, and insisted that I have dinner with my daughters and tell them, and I did. And my daughters were very, very supportive of my decision, and they knew what it meant, but they were very, very supportive. And my wife today and I, we talk once a week. We visit 5 or 6 times a year. She's a very close friend. And Bobby and I have this wonderful relationship. And my daughters love him, and my grandkids love him, and so forth. And I'm as happy as can be. I am openly gay. I don't wear a neon light. I don't think that's important.
Me neither,
But
I did when it first came out. Boy, was that light neon, but not anymore,
I've never done that. And some people, but I'm very open. People know that I'm gay, but I'm very open and very supportive of the gay community and so on. But I'm so happy. I just am, and be able to still have my family loving me and supporting me during all this. I did lose some friends, no doubt about it. I acknowledge that. But that's their problem, not mine.
Yeah, so I noticed you've gone to those events at Disney with Bobby. I actually went to that once. I went to back, either it was a different event or it was called something different. I went to Gay Days back in 2010.
At
that
Disney
was fun.
World?
Got to see Joan Rivers on stage.
In Disney World?
Yeah, it
It's
was
still
all around Orlando. It was all around Orlando.
Yeah.
But big
Yeah.
parties at Disney, huge parades and things like that.
We've been going there. Bobby and I have been going there every year for, I don't know, 10, 20, 15 years at least.
Yeah. Money is an issue. So I decided to just live it up one year and go, but yeah, so there's a question I ask everybody who I interview, even if they don't have the slightest bit to do with artistic creativity, which is there are a ton of disabled creators. We're talking authors, set designers, hairstylists. We're talking about set,
Actors,
actors,
singers.
gamers, game developers, comic book artists and writers, and these individuals with disabilities. And the arts community has talked a good game about inclusion, and they've done some, but we're trying to up that. So what, in your mind, do you think that the arts community can do to up inclusion of creators with disabilities?
We still have a person who's gay, who's the CEO of Apple, right? I mean,
Right,
so,
I'm talking about with disabilities,
but
though.
now I'm going to go to disabilities. He should be supportive of our efforts on disabilities. I think the issue is this, is that we have a culture problem in regards to the disability community, and that people for years perceived us as incapable of doing X. And so people were paternalistic. I always say Jerry Lewis's telethons
Uh,
were, come out here, let me show you, pat you on the head, go back in the corner and I'll take care of you. And that's not where we are. We basically want to be involved in the decisions that are made about us. And so, but that culture, what Jerry Lewis and the telethon and that whole thing created was a sympathy thing. Let's help them. Let's take care of them. And we now are going through that transition about getting respect. And I always say that the biggest problem we have today is not the laws. The biggest problem we have today is stigma, and that people perceive you or me or whatever, that we are unable to function and be part of the economic part of life. Where, look at, there are things I can't do because of my epilepsy. I can't drive an ambulance. I can't drive a airplane, a flight airplane. I can't drive or be involved as a policeman or carry a gun. I know all those things. But what? There are things that I can do better than anybody else. And what we all have to do is look at me, look at you, look at whoever has a disability as to what each of us can do, as opposed to what you can't do. But people immediately assume that if you're in a wheelchair, oh my God, I feel sorry for him or her, and let me help them. Where that's the wrong attitude, the wrong thing to do. But basically, how do we get that done? We're working hard on it. Disability community, this is our focus. And we're making progress. I don't deny that. We're making progress. But it's still hard. What people don't appreciate, a lot of people, when they go to a doctor's office, if they're in a chair or other kinds of mobility problems, they don't get examined the same way that other people do.
Right.
And you can go on and on about how society hasn't changed enough. Curb cuts now are very common, used by everybody. But those are the type of things that we as a community, not the disability, but we as a nation and a community, take a lot of those things for granted. Whereas if they would provide for the accessibility, it would help everybody out, not just those of us with disabilities, but would help everybody out. And we'd be able to participate. The big thing going on right now is access to the internet.
Right.
Everybody has to have the internet and pay the bills, shopping, particularly with the pandemic that's going on today. But a lot of companies exclude us from their system. And now we finally have a court decision that says the internet is covered by the ADA.
Good.
Now it's a question of getting that challenged. Lawsuits are coming out. Good. I want more. Ultimately, we'll make progress there.
I think, what was it? Just as Justin Trudeau became Prime Minister of Canada, there was a Supreme Court decision, Supreme Court of Canada,
Right.
that decided that basic high-speed internet is an inalienable human right that everybody should have access to. I mean, we're kind of being left in the dust by these countries. And one thing you mentioned earlier, and that comes up with the arts thing, is disability and employment. It's been, this is, I'm going to air this for my 30th anniversary celebration of the ADA, of course.
Good,
And
good.
it's been 30 years, and yet we are nowhere near where we should be in employment. I mean, take care of that away.
I think the one thing we've got to remember as a community, that in the 60s, people of color got their rights. In the 70s, women got their rights. In the 90s, the gay community got their rights. And here we are finally getting our rights. Don't tell me that people of color have got everything that everybody else has. They don't. Don't tell me that women have everything that they need.
Right.
They don't. Don't tell me that the gays have everything they need. So it is important for us to change the attitude of society, and that is key and critical. I think we're the largest community in the nation, because we're in everything. We're women, we're men, we're gays, we're everything you want to consider, blacks, Hispanics, Asian, we're everywhere.
And as this population grows older, everybody will be disabled in some way.
And so what we need to do as a community is to understand our political power. And we don't do that yet. One of the reasons is we don't collectively raise money to be involved in the candidate for mayor or the candidate for city council or the governor or senator or president. We're getting more there finally. We're starting to be engaged. We always advocate on policy, and that's good. We can succeed. But where we really get power is when we play the political game. In other words, we raise money, we get involved in trying to get people to vote. We educate elected officials when they're campaigning as to what our needs are. We're very organized and involved. That's when we're going to get our rights. That's what's happening to every other group, and we're no different. We got to fight for those rights just like every other group, and it's up to us to do it. We sometimes say, well, it's up to them to give it to us. No, it's up to us to demand it and proceed and go after it.
And cross-disability efforts are very important, because one way that people have divided us in the past is by, cold clinical diagnosis, and we have so much more in common. I am of the opinion that there are 3 levels of identity that everyone has. We are the unique individual that we are.
Yeah.
More important than that, we have all of our special stuff going on, gay, disabled, whatever. But the most important identity that everyone has is we are all humans living on this wonderful blue marble together. And we have a lot more in common than we ever will have that sets us apart.
You're absolutely right. And I think we need to, my view is that we need to educate people as to our presence on this beautiful planet, as you say. But it's up to us to fight for it. If we don't, people will keep us in the back seat, and we've got to fight to be involved.
Right. So anyway, I wanted to thank you for sitting with me today. It's been totally awesome. And did you have anything else you wanted to say?
No, thank you. That was a great interview.
Yeah, no problem. I mean, we could chat forever, but I know you're very busy, and I myself have got a lot to do. But I want to make sure, please stay safe and have a good 8830, everyone.
Thank you. Love you. Talk to you later.
I love you too. Okay, take
Bye-bye.
care.